Hey there. Welcome to Midnight Sleep Crime. I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know many of you use this video to fall asleep, so before you get too cozy, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to hear from you. Story 1. When a charming southern widow loses 4 husbands in 12 years, each to bizarre and tragic accidents, locals chalk it up to terrible luck. But when a young funeral director notices something off in their final preparations, he uncovers a chilling pattern buried beneath layers of charm, grief, and decades of deception. It was raining again in Madison County. Heavy, southern rain that clung to the skin and saturated the red clay roads until they squelched under the weight of a single footstep. Inside the modest brick funeral home on Magnolia Avenue, the atmosphere was thick with perfume, wilted lilies, and whispered suspicions. Harold Knox's casket was closed, per Delilah's request. Too much damage from the accident, she'd told the director, her handkerchief daintily pressing against her cheek. I don't want people to remember him like that. No one argued. Who would? She'd just lost her 4th husband. 4. In 12 years. Delilah Knox was a woman who inspired equal parts admiration and discomfort. To outsiders, she was the epitome of Southern grace, poised, soft-spoken, and elegant even in mourning. But to those who lived in the winding corridors of her life, neighbors, church ladies, and the town's aging sheriff, she was a question mark wrapped in silk. Each death had a reason, a logical, if unfortunate, explanation. James Knox, the first, had fallen down the stairs. A neck snapped instantly. It was ruled an accident. Gregory Knox, her second, drowned in the lake behind their property. Fishing trip gone wrong. Thomas Knox, number 3, died in a freak garage explosion. He'd been tinkering with propane. And now Harold, the most recent, had apparently fallen asleep at the wheel and crashed into a tree just 2 miles from home. All different causes, all seemingly plausible. But 4 husbands? Even in Madison County, that raised eyebrows. Standing quietly at the edge of the room was the funeral director, Benjamin Carter. He was 31, soft-featured, and meticulous about death, not just in practice, but in philosophy. He'd worked in the industry since his early 20s and had seen every manner of human passing. But this one bothered him. It wasn't just Harold's condition. It was the way Delilah had handled everything, from the speed at which she approved cremation paperwork, to the way she declined embalming without blinking, to the exact same floral arrangement she ordered for every one of her husbands. White lilies, always lilies. Casket closed, always closed. Ben noticed something else, too. Each obituary she submitted was written in the same clipped tone, beautifully worded but cold, distant. Beloved husband, faithful to the end. May he rest in God's mercy. Cut, paste, repeat. It didn't sit right. After the service, Delilah stayed behind. Ben offered her a quiet room to collect herself. She accepted with a gracious nod, her dark mourning dress clinging to her slight frame. As she sat in the dim corner near the electric fireplace, Ben stepped in with a cup of tea. Chamomile, no sugar. Delilah glanced up. You're a kind man, Mr. Carter. Just doing what I can, Mrs. Knox. She sipped. The room was quiet for a long while. Then she said something that stuck with him. Some people are born with storms inside them, and some marry them. She didn't elaborate, didn't explain. Just finished her tea, stood up, and floated out with her black veil fluttering behind her like a shadow with wings. That night, Ben reviewed Harold Knox's intake report. The coroner's notes were brief. Head trauma consistent with vehicular impact. But one line caught his eye. No seatbelt indentations. He pulled out the other files, the 3 prior husbands. Each one had a unique COD, but there were similarities. No defensive injuries, no real signs of struggle, and in each case, Delilah had signed off on cremation within 24 hours. Too quick, too clean, and yet, just legal enough. The next morning, Ben drove to the county records office. He wasn't sure why he did it. Curiosity, maybe. Or maybe the prickling instinct that comes from brushing up against evil that doesn't look like evil. He requested all marriage and death certificates involving Delilah Knox. There were more than he expected. She had not just 4, but 6 marriages on record. 2 were pre-Madison County, 1 in Georgia, 1 in Florida. The husbands had different surnames, but the birth date on the wife's certificate was consistent. June 3rd, 1979. The name changed, Delilah Mays, Delilah Harris, but the pattern didn't. Each man died within 3 years of marrying her, all ruled accidents, all cremated. He contacted an old friend from mortuary school who worked in Savannah, where the first husband, Elias Mays, had died. Found his death record, the friend said over the phone. Slipped in the tub, cracked his skull. Weird thing was, he was in perfect health, clean home, no sign of foul play. Ben's heart started pounding. And she signed the cremation within hours, the friend added. Whole thing was expedited? What about toxicology? Didn't do one. No reason to suspect anything. Why? Ben didn't answer. He just hung up and stared at the names scribbled across the notepad in front of him. Elias Mays, Michael Harris, James Knox, Gregory Knox, Thomas Knox, Harold Knox, 6 men, 1 woman, all dead. He made a call to Sheriff Clyde Davis. Clyde was old school and slow-moving, but fair. He'd known Delilah for years, had attended her first wedding to James Knox back in 2009. She's had terrible luck, Clyde said after hearing Ben's concerns. But that ain't a crime. I know, Ben replied. But isn't it strange? All 6 men died under weird circumstances, always at home, always cremated, always ruled accidental. Clyde sighed heavily. You got evidence or you got feelings? Ben paused. Not yet. Then you best be careful accusing a grieving widow, especially one who donates half her inheritance to the church. Click. That night, someone broke into Ben's funeral home. Nothing was stolen, nothing vandalized, but someone had been inside. He found Harold's cremation documents pulled from the filing cabinet, set neatly on his desk, with a single white lily placed on top. Ben's skin went cold. There were no fingerprints, no signs of forced entry, just that flower. As if someone was reminding him that Delilah Knox didn't need to say much to make a point. But Ben wasn't about to be scared off. The next day, he drove 2 hours to the state archive and began combing through court documents, life insurance claims, and obituary notices from counties that had long since stopped asking questions. What he found was damning. Each husband had left behind a policy. Nothing enormous, but always enough to keep Delilah living comfortably. The payouts had been quick, no contest, no disputes. She'd collected over $1.2 million over 15 years, and she hadn't worked a single job since 2007. That night, Ben made a choice. He was going to stop her, even if it killed him. Ben Carter had spent the better part of his adult life surrounded by death, but never like this. Not the quiet, natural kind. Not the expected passing of age or illness. This was something darker, more intelligent. Death with intention. And it had a name. Delilah Knox. He stared at the insurance documents spread out across his office floor. 6 policies, 6 deaths, all settled with barely a wrinkle. No contest, no investigations. All husbands, all cremated, all Delilah. It was one thing to suspect coincidence, another to start counting patterns. Ben knew he had stepped off the safe path. He'd gone from funeral director to amateur investigator in under 48 hours. And now, something told him he had Delilah's attention. The flower left on his desk the night before was more than just a calling card. It was a message. She knew, and she wasn't afraid. On a hunch, Ben drove out to the estate Delilah shared with Harold, just off an old logging road surrounded by overgrown woods. The Knox residence sat at the top of a gentle hill, shrouded in moss-covered oaks. It was both elegant and unsettling, like a place that belonged in a Southern Gothic novel. He stayed in his car and surveyed from a distance. No movement, no lights. He didn't dare approach, not without a plan. But something gnawed at him as he watched the house. A sense that beneath its pristine white columns and wraparound porch lay something rotting, hidden under layers of charm and wealth. Ben returned to town and did what no one else in Madison County seemed willing to do. He started asking questions, discreetly at first. He visited the church where Delilah was a longtime donor and spoke with Pastor Green, a thin, balding man with a nervous energy. Delilah's had a hard life, the pastor said. She's a generous soul, always volunteering, always tithing. But did she ever talk about her husbands? Ben asked. Any of them? Green hesitated. Only the last one, Harold. She said he had demons, drank more than he should, sometimes disappeared for days. Ben blinked. That didn't line up with what he'd read in Harold's obituary, or what people at the funeral had said about him. A quiet, respectable insurance broker with no known vices. Did she ever seem, I don't know, off to you? The pastor stiffened. She's buried 6 men, Mr. Carter. If she's off, maybe grief made her that way. Next, Ben visited the town clerk's office. He pulled Delilah's file again and noticed something odd in the timeline. She had married Thomas Knox just 4 months after Gregory died. And between Thomas and Harold, barely 5 months. It was too fast. No time for mourning, no breathing room. Almost like each death was a stepping stone to the next. He looked closer at the marriage licenses. In each one, Delilah listed different addresses, never the same residence, never the same job. She moved frequently, sometimes across state lines, a classic pattern of someone trying to stay ahead of a paper trail. Then something clicked. The first 2 marriages, Elias Mays and Michael Harris, both took place in counties where the public records were now digital. He pulled them up on a statewide database. Neither man had family listed. No emergency contacts. No next of kin. Just Delilah. Ben decided to dig deeper into Elias Mays, the very first husband. According to his death certificate, he'd drowned in a hotel bathtub in Savannah after excessive drinking, a tragic accident. But the toxicology report, what little existed, was handwritten and filed by a coroner who'd since passed away. Ben tracked down a man named Marcus Langley, a retired detective who worked that case back in 2008. I remember that one, Langley said over the phone. The guy was naked, face down in the tub. Nothing about it screamed murder, but... But? Ben asked. Langley sighed. She wasn't wet. What? When we got there, she said she'd found him like that. Claimed she had just stepped out to get ice, but she was dry, fully done up. Hair, makeup, perfume, not a smudge out of place. Ben felt a cold pulse rise in his throat. She didn't touch him. Not once, Langley said. Didn't even try CPR, said she froze. Why didn't you investigate further? She lawyered up, had a copy of the insurance policy ready, and the hotel footage backed her up. She really did leave the room to get ice. The window was small, maybe 10 minutes. Ben hung up with a shaking hand. Delilah was smart, calculated. She knew how long it took to kill someone and how to look innocent doing it. Back in Madison County, Ben was getting nervous. He hadn't seen Delilah since the funeral, but she was beginning to feel like a presence in his life. Watching. Waiting. He began double-checking the locks on his doors, leaving lights on at night. He even stopped using the same route to work. Then came the letter. No return address. Typed. Short. You are not the first man to dig into my past, but you will be the last. There was no signature, just a pressed white lily between the folds of the paper. Ben took the letter to Sheriff Clyde Davis, but the old man barely glanced at it. She's been through hell, Clyde muttered. Don't go poking ghosts that aren't yours. It's a threat, Ben insisted. Looks more like a warning. Same thing. Clyde handed the paper back. You don't have any real evidence, Ben. Just theories and fear. Ben left the station more furious than afraid. He realized that Delilah had more than charm. She had power, the kind that made men overlook logic, that let her move freely while death followed like a loyal dog. But Ben was done being scared. He needed proof. Real proof. He knew he couldn't exhume any of the bodies. There were none left. Cremation had taken care of that. But what he could do was find someone who knew her before she became Delilah. A former friend, a relative, anyone. He called every number tied to her name over the past 20 years. Most were disconnected. Some went to old properties now abandoned or sold. Then he found a landline listed under Charlotte Mayfield in Valdosta, Georgia. She answered on the fourth ring. I'm looking for information about Delilah Knox, Ben said. Silence. Then, you mean Lila Mays? Ben's pulse jumped. Yes, you knew her. I was her roommate. Back in 2004, Ben asked if she'd ever met Elias, the first husband. Once, Charlotte said. We had drinks. He seemed sweet. And then she said he took her to Savannah for their honeymoon. 3 days later, he was dead. Did she seem upset? Charlotte hesitated. She cried. But the night after his funeral, she went out dancing. Ben convinced Charlotte to speak with him in person. He made the 3-hour drive the next day and met her at a coffee shop near Valdosta State. Charlotte was in her 40s now, a teacher with 2 kids. But the moment she started talking about Delilah, her voice shook. She was beautiful, Charlotte said, like a movie star. Men worshipped her, but there was something cruel behind her eyes. Did she ever mention killing Elias? Number, but she told me something once I never forgot. Charlotte looked around, then leaned in. She said, men are meant to provide. That's their only purpose. If they stop, you find another. Ben swallowed. Did anyone else ever suspect anything? One guy, her second fiancé, not Michael Harris, someone before him. A bartender named Jay. He disappeared before they could marry. Disappeared how? Just gone. No trace. Ben's hand trembled as he lifted his coffee. Did anyone investigate? Not really, Charlotte said. He had priors. The cops figured he skipped town. That night, Ben returned home and found another envelope taped to his door. This time inside was a photo. Black and white, grainy, but unmistakable. It was of him. Standing outside Charlotte's coffee shop, Delilah had followed him. She knew everything, and she was getting closer. The photograph chilled Ben more than any ghost story ever could. There he was, clear as day, coffee in hand, leaning toward Charlotte, mouth mid-sentence, taken from a distance but unmistakably him. Delilah wasn't just watching. She was tracking him. She knew where he went, who he spoke to, what he was doing, every move he made, and she wasn't hiding it anymore. This wasn't a warning. It was a threat. And worse, it was personal now. Ben didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of wind against the window made his skin crawl. He kept his bedroom door locked, a fire poker next to his bed. He'd tried reason. He'd tried the sheriff. But the law wasn't going to help. Not in Madison County. not when it came to Delilah Knox. She had too many friends in high places, too many people wrapped around her finger, and she knew how to kill without ever pulling a trigger. Ben was certain now Delilah had murdered her husbands, maybe not with poison or knives, but with manipulation, timing, isolation, the perfect orchestration of grief and greed. And if she felt threatened, she would strike again. Ben's only hope was to gather enough evidence to take her down before she could silence him like the others. He returned to his office, locked the door, and opened a new file on his laptop labeled Delilah Knox, Pattern of Death. He listed each husband chronologically. Elias Mays, drowned in hotel bathtub, Savannah, Georgia. Michael Harris, fell downstairs, closed head injury, Charleston, South Carolina. Gregory Ellis, carbon monoxide poisoning in garage, Mobile, AL, Thomas Knox. Accidental overdose of sleeping pills, Tallahassee, FL, Daniel Fry. Car crash on a rainy road, no skid marks, Athens, GA. Harold Knox, died in sleep. Heart attack, Madison County, GA, 6 men, 6 different causes, all natural or accidental, all cremated, all left estates behind to Delilah. He created a web diagram next, linking Delilah to known aliases: Lila Mays, Delia Harris, Dee Ellis, Lana Fry. She always changed her name slightly, just enough to avoid suspicion. Always moved every few years. Each time the same story played out. A short courtship, a marriage, a death, then a payout. And then she vanished again. But what truly unnerved Ben were the ones who didn't make it into the obituary columns. The ones who never made it to marriage. Like Jay, the bartender Charlotte had mentioned. Ben searched old missing persons reports in Savannah, Charleston, and Tallahassee, focusing on any men aged 30 to 50 who vanished during the same years Delilah lived in those cities. He found 3 cases. Jason Monroe, Charleston bartender, reported missing in 2010. Brent Waller, handyman, Tallahassee, last seen in 2013. Kurt Hollis, freelance photographer, Savannah, vanished in 2007. None of them had been found. All had briefly dated a woman who fit Delilah's description, though her name was different in each case. And in each report, the last person to see them, a neighbor, a co-worker, a bartender. She was real pretty, they said. Didn't catch her name. Might have been Dee or Laney or something. Ben leaned back in his chair and exhaled. This wasn't just a pattern. It was a body count. He decided to revisit the funeral home's archives. His father had kept meticulous notes on every service, every client. Maybe he'd overlooked something in Harold's records. Tucked in the back of the drawer was an audio recording, standard for in-house intake interviews. It was Delilah's voice, low and syrupy. I want it all kept simple, just a closed casket. No wake, no viewing. He wouldn't want people gawking at him. And cremation, of course. Ben paused. Closed casket? He hadn't remembered Harold's body being in poor condition. In fact, the paramedics had listed no visible trauma. He skipped forward. Yes, he had a will. I'm the sole beneficiary. There was no one else. No children, no family. It's just me now. The casual coldness in her voice was unmistakable. No grief, no hesitation. Ben took the audio file, printed death certificates, and his growing case log to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. He managed to get a meeting with a junior agent named Kara DuPont, who listened carefully as he laid out the patterns. Do you have any physical evidence? She asked. No, Ben admitted. But I have motive, opportunity, and consistency. The deaths may look different, but the pattern is identical. She marries, she inherits, they die. DuPont looked skeptical. You realize how thin this is legally? Ben nodded. That's why I need help. She's stalking me now. I think she'll try to kill me too. DuPont sighed. If you're right, She's a black widow. But unless you catch her in the act, or one of those deaths gets reopened, there's not much I can do." Ben stared at the agent. "What if I could find a body?" He returned to Madison County with a renewed focus. If he couldn't exhume the husbands, maybe he could find one of the missing men. If even one body turned up, it could unravel her carefully maintained illusion. He started with the oldest case, Kurt Hollis, the freelance photographer from Savannah. According to the missing persons report, Kurt was last seen leaving a bar with a woman matching Delilah's description. Witnesses said she had an accent, maybe Southern, and wore a red coat. Ben found Kurt's mother, who still lived in Savannah. She was in her 70s now, frail and soft-spoken, but still held on to hope her son would walk through the door one day. "He was in love," she said. "Wouldn't tell me her name, said I'd disapprove, but she made him happy, for a little while." Ben asked if she still had anything of his, photos, journals, anything. She handed over an old shoebox filled with pictures. One caught Ben's eye. A woman on a beach, back turned, long dark hair, red coat. Ben's fingers trembled as he flipped it over. Lana, March 2007. There it was, another name, another timeline. He had a photo now. Not perfect, not face on, but it placed Delilah, Lana, with a man who vanished weeks later. Ben drove to the last known address Kurt rented before his disappearance. It had long since been foreclosed, but the current owner, a young man renovating the house, let Ben look around. In the backyard, beyond the overgrown grass, was a small storage shed. The lock was rusted, unused. Inside, everything was dust-covered and stale. Lawn chairs, paint cans, old photo gear, and then a wooden box, water-damaged but intact. Ben pried it open. Inside were photos, hundreds of them, all black and white. Women, faces, couples. He recognized Delilah in 3 of them, one at a park, one in a kitchen, one in bed, smiling, her head on Kurt's bare chest. This was proof they had a relationship. But something else caught his eye. A necklace, still hanging around the neck of a mannequin torso Kurt used for lighting tests. It wasn't valuable, but it matched the description of one Delilah had worn to Harold's funeral. She'd kept it, or took it, or stole it. Ben turned over the mannequin and froze. Scratch marks on the floorboards, faint but visible. He knelt down, lifted the boards, and saw a bone. He backed out of the shed and called the GBI. DuPont herself showed up the next morning, alongside a forensic team. The remains were found buried beneath the shed's flooring, shallow grave, wrapped in tarp, half mummified by the dry heat. Dental records confirmed it within 2 days. Kurt Hollis. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the skull. Time of death: approximately 3 days after his last known sighting. And just like that, the house Delilah had built for herself began to collapse. Ben's phone rang that night. It was DuPont. "We have enough to bring her in. The photo, the remains, the connection. But she's gone." "Gone?" Ben asked, his voice hoarse. "She didn't show up at her estate today. Her car's gone. Her phone's disconnected." Ben swallowed. "She knows we're closing in." "Exactly," DuPont said. "And she's dangerous. If she thinks you're the reason, you might be her next target." Ben turned toward his dark window. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, and somewhere in that darkness, Delilah Knox was watching, waiting. The sun had long since dipped beneath the Georgia pines, casting long shadows over Ben's front porch when the knock came. Not the doorbell, a knock. Software intentional. 2 sharp taps, then silence. Ben froze. His first thought was irrational. Childhood fear, ghost story nonsense. But then the fear turned sharp and real. Delilah. He approached slowly, fire poker in hand. He peered through the curtain. No one on the porch, nothing on the step, no car in the driveway. Just the hush of night and the unshakable sense that something, had been there. He opened the door a crack. A single item had been left on his welcome mat, a wedding band. Ben recognized it immediately. The initials engraved inside, DF to DK, belonged to Daniel Fry, Delilah's fifth husband, the man who had supposedly died in a car accident. Ben's stomach twisted. She wasn't just running, she was hunting. Agent DuPont ordered immediate surveillance of Ben's home. 2 unmarked cars were placed nearby, and Ben was told to avoid his routine. No coffee shop stops, no grocery store runs, no morning jogs. Delilah had vanished off the grid, but her messages kept coming. Each night, something new was left behind. The second night, a faded Polaroid, Ben, age 6, standing beside his father outside the funeral home, holding a paper bouquet. The third night, a small white bird figurine, identical to one his mother used to keep on her bedroom dresser. The fourth, a torn piece of Charlotte's dress, blood-stained. That night, Ben nearly collapsed from panic. He tried calling Charlotte, but she didn't answer. He drove to her home, banged on the door until the porch light flicked on. Charlotte stood there in sweatpants, holding a mug of tea. Ben exhaled with relief. "She's toying with me," he said. "She's trying to unravel me piece by piece." Charlotte pulled him inside. "Then don't give her what she wants." The GBI issued a regional alert for Delilah Knox, warning surrounding states, airports, bus stations. But without a confirmed ID, no fingerprints on file, no confirmed aliases, they were chasing a ghost. Ben reviewed everything he had again, looking for patterns. She didn't run randomly. She ran strategically. After each husband's death, she always disappeared into a region where she had previously lived under another name. Mobile, Charleston, Savannah, Tallahassee. Where would she go next? One city kept popping up in Delilah's scattered trail: Montgomery, Alabama. She'd lived there briefly in 2009, under the name Lillian Hart. Nothing suspicious had happened. No death, no marriage. Just a quiet 6-month period where she worked at a florist, then left without a word. DuPont pulled security footage from banks, gas stations, and rest stops near Montgomery. On the third day, they got a hit. A woman matching Delilah's face shape and height, now blonde, wearing large sunglasses, was seen withdrawing cash at a gas station ATM just outside the city. The timestamp was only 6 hours old. Ben stared at the screen. "That's her." DuPont nodded. "We're closing in." They traced her movements to a rural motel called the Briar Inn on the outskirts of town. When SWAT entered the room, it was empty. Just a black wig in the trash and an empty suitcase on the bed. But the most chilling find was inside the room's mini fridge. A photograph. Ben, asleep in his bed. The shot had been taken from inside his house. Ben moved into a safe house under GBI protection, but he couldn't sit still. Every second he wasn't working the case, his mind circled the same thought. How long had she been in my house? When did she take the photo? How close did she get? He returned to the funeral home during daylight hours, scanning through old visitor logs, searching for any record of Lillian Hart or any of her other known aliases. Most of the logs were paper from the early 2000s, handwritten by his father. Then he saw it. A 2009 entry. Name, L. Hart. Purpose, inquiring about pre-arrangement packages. Ben blinked. That was the same year she'd been in Montgomery. Why had she visited their funeral home all the way from Alabama? And more importantly, who had she come to ask about? He followed the record number to a file cabinet and pulled the index card. Client, Doris Langtree. Date of death, pending. Ben frowned. That wasn't how prearrangement worked. You didn't list someone else's name unless you were preparing for a relative. And Delilah had no known connection to a Doris Langtry. But something about the name stuck in Ben's mind. He opened the town archive database and typed it in. Doris Langtry had been a schoolteacher. She'd lived in Madison County. She'd been declared missing in 2009. Her case had gone cold after 3 months. And the last person to rent the cottage behind her house? Lillian Hart. Delilah. Ben drove to the Langtry property, now boarded up and overgrown. As he stepped into the backyard, he saw the remains of what had once been a garden. A few crumbling stepping stones led to a tool shed. Inside, the air was stale, but it smelled of bleach. He looked down at the dirt floor, freshly disturbed in one corner. He called DuPont. The forensic team arrived within hours. They found human remains, tightly wrapped and buried in a shallow grave. Dental records later confirmed the identity. Doris Langtry. Murder weapon, a blow to the head. Motive, unclear, but the cause of concealment was clear. Delilah had hidden the body, vanished, and moved on. And now the GBI had 2 murders tied to her name. The search intensified. The FBI stepped in. Delilah's face, digitally aged, recolored, morphed, appeared on every news channel in the Southeast. Rewards were offered. Tips poured in. Most were dead ends. Until a gas station clerk in Jackson, Mississippi, called in a woman matching the description. She'd paid in cash, bought road maps, left behind a receipt. It was dated 2 days ago. She was heading west. Ben sat with DuPont that night, both staring at the growing timeline. She's trying to vanish again, DuPont said. New life, new name, same cycle. Ben whispered, we're running out of time. DuPont stood. Then we don't wait for her to strike. We set a trap. They put the word out that a new funeral director had taken over Ben's business. Single, wealthy. Local paper ran a feature. Madison's most eligible bachelor. They created a fake profile, a dating app presence, a name, Mark Hanley, a persona, viuda, bien avenida, buscando compañía. The bait was set. They waited. For 2 weeks, nothing. Then a message. From a profile named Annie Fields, blonde, sweet. Her first message. You seem familiar, Mark. Ever been to Savannah? Ben's hands went cold. It was her. Under heavy surveillance, Mark Hanley replied. Casual, cautious. DuPont coached every word. They chatted. She was coy. He was charming. She suggested dinner. Mark agreed. The GBI wired the restaurant. Agents posed as waitstaff. Ben wore a concealed mic and sat at the corner booth. At 7:12 p.m., she walked in, dressed in green, sunglasses, a black scarf, still beautiful, still dangerous. She smiled like an old lover seeing a ghost. Mark? She purred. Ben nodded. Annie. She sat down, and with a flicker of a smile whispered, I knew you'd come for me eventually. The restaurant was quiet. Too quiet. Soft jazz floated overhead, blending with the muted clink of silverware and glass. But to Ben, the atmosphere was razor-edged. Every breath, every blink, every syllable from Delilah, Annie Fields, felt like stepping across a minefield. She wore emerald green like it was armor. Her lipstick was the shade of ripe cherries. Her hands moved like waves, graceful, hypnotic, but Ben noticed her knuckles, small scars, faint abrasions, signs of a fighter, or worse, a killer who had cleaned up a mess too many times. You're not what I expected, she said, sipping wine. Ben forced a chuckle. And what did you expect? She tilted her head. Someone older, someone lonelier. She was fishing, testing the persona. Ben played along. Lonely, maybe. But I like to think I still clean up well. She smirked. So modest. Behind the bar, Agent DuPont pretended to wipe glasses. 2 other agents played the part of a couple in the corner. Backup waited outside. The GBI had been careful. No wire she could spot, no visible earpieces, no sudden moves. Ben was the bait, but everyone else was the hook. "Tell me, Annie," he said carefully, "what brings you back to Georgia?" Her eyes glittered, unreadable. "Let's just say I left some unfinished business." Ben's pulse quickened. "You from around here?" "Not anymore." She looked around the room, her eyes scanning the exits, calculating. Even now, under cover, under pressure, Delilah never stopped looking for escape routes. "I travel a lot," she said. "Never liked staying in one place." "Why not?" "People get boring." Ben gave a dry laugh. "You must have met the wrong people." She stared at him. Long, hard. The flirtation vanished. In its place, a sudden stillness, like a snake preparing to strike. "I think we both know," she said softly, "that you're not really Mark Hanley." Ben froze. "Excuse me?" "You flinch like a cop," she whispered. "You watch the door too much, and you drink water, not wine. That tells me you're on edge, or wired, or both." She leaned in closer, voice like silk-wrapped steel. "I know who you are, Ben." The name hit him like a punch to the gut. Then, before he could respond, she sat back, folded her napkin, and said aloud, "Thanks for dinner. I'll be in touch." She stood up, stepped away, and within seconds she was through the doors, disappearing into the night like smoke. DuPont shouted, "Move! She's on foot!" Agents stormed out of the restaurant. Ben followed, heart pounding. But she was already gone. Gone again. They reviewed the footage. Her car, a red Ford Fusion, was found abandoned behind a florist shop 2 blocks over. Inside was another wig, a phone, and a small glass jar. Inside the jar, human teeth. 3 of them. They were sent to forensics. 1 matched Caleb Ward, her 3rd husband. 1 matched Daniel Fry, the 5th. The 3rd was unknown. Ben stared at the jar, his stomach churning. "She's keeping trophies," DuPont said grimly. Ben whispered, "She knew. She always knew." Now the GBI knew something else. Delilah was no longer just killing husbands and fleeing. She was toying with law enforcement, collecting, planning. And worst of all, she had vanished again. No trail, no leads. Ben refused to go back to the safe house. He returned to the funeral home, fortified with cameras, reinforced locks, and a 24/7 security detail. Delilah had been inside before. She might come back. He needed to understand her. So he went through everything. Every obituary, every client record, every family Delilah had interacted with. He looked for patterns, timing, motives. One name stuck out: Noah Carmichael. Delilah, under the name Megan Kerr, had briefly worked as a hospice aide in 2012. Carmichael was her assigned patient's nephew, wealthy, divorced, widowed again 2 years later. His death was ruled an accident, carbon monoxide poisoning, but no autopsy was performed. Ben called the coroner who signed off on the report, a retired man named Clarence Wolfe. He answered groggily, "Mr. Wolfe, did you perform the autopsy on Noah Carmichael?" Wolfe paused. Number his family waived it. "Why?" "They said he had heart trouble, wanted a quick burial." "And the woman who called it in, did she sound like family?" "No," Wolfe muttered. "She said she was his fiancée." Ben's breath caught. "Do you remember her name?" "Yeah, Megan something. Another victim, another cover-up. And this one, buried without a body exhumation." Ben and DuPont returned to the Carmichael plot with a court order in hand. The dig began at dawn. When they opened the casket, it was empty. Not just missing a body, it was filled with sandbags, a dummy in a suit, and a note. Scrawled across it in red ink, "You're always one step too slow, Ben." Ben stepped back from the grave, heart hammering. "She's mocking me." DuPont nodded grimly. And she's always ahead. Back at the station, DuPont brought out the big board. 11 confirmed aliases, 7 confirmed murders, 4 presumed but unconfirmed, and 1 name that hadn't yet been connected to a death. Charlotte Rains. Ben stared at her photo. He picked up the phone and called. No answer. He called again. Still nothing. Panic gripped him like a vice. He grabbed his coat, shouted to DuPont, "I'm going to her house," and ran for the car. Charlotte's lights were on. Her car was in the driveway, but she didn't answer the door. Ben kicked it open. The place was eerily clean. Too clean. A single cup of tea sat on the table, still warm. Her phone was on the couch. Then he saw the bedroom. Empty. But on the mirror, smeared in red lipstick, was a message. She told me everything. Charlotte was gone. Ben returned to the GBI office, shaking. "She got her," he said. DuPont grabbed the lipstick sample from the mirror. It was fresh. It wasn't Delilah's color. It matched one Charlotte had been wearing in a photo from 3 nights ago. DuPont didn't like it. "She wouldn't go willingly," he said. "Unless..." Ben stared at him. "Unless she's working with her." Silence hung in the room like smoke. Ben shook his head. "Number, that's impossible." DuPont replied, "How well do you really know Charlotte?" Ben thought back. She'd always been there when he needed her. She offered comfort, advice, but also, she asked a lot of questions. About the case, about Delilah, about his father. And then there was that night, 2 months ago, when he caught her in the funeral home after hours. She said she left her scarf, but she was standing near the client records. Ben suddenly felt cold. "Check the visitor logs," he said. DuPont nodded. Minutes later, he returned with a printed entry. March 4th, 2019. Visitor, Charlotte Rains. Purpose, inquiring about Delilah Knox. Ben's heart shattered. "She knew," he whispered. DuPont said nothing. He just handed him the final piece. Security footage, Charlotte, in the records room, copying Delilah's file. Was she a pawn, an accomplice, or something worse? Ben's entire reality shifted. Delilah hadn't just killed her way across states. She'd pulled others into her game. And now, Charlotte, the one person Ben thought he could trust, was missing. Or possibly had never been missing at all. That night, a package arrived at the GBI office. No return address. Inside, a USB drive. They played it. It was a video, shot in a dark room. One light swinging overhead. Charlotte, tied to a chair, silent, alive. Delilah stood beside her. She smiled into the camera. "Hi, Ben. I see you've been busy, but we're just getting started." She leaned in close, her voice turning icy. "You've taken everything from me. My freedom, my fun." Her eyes narrowed. "So now, I'm going to take everything from you." She turned to Charlotte. "And when I'm done with her, I'll come for you." The video cut out. Ben clenched his fists, fury boiling inside him. No more running, no more traps, no more waiting. He was going to find her, and this time, he was going to end it. Ben stared at the darkened screen long after the video ended. Delilah's message echoed in his head. "I'm going to take everything from you." She'd done it before. One murder at a time. A silent war waged over a decade. And now she had Charlotte, the one person who'd ever tried to pull Ben out of the grave he called a career. The office was silent. Even Agent DuPont, the eternal cynic, seemed shaken. He leaned against the desk, arms folded, watching Ben unravel. "This is personal," he finally said. "We're not dealing with a spree killer anymore. We're dealing with a hunter." Ben didn't answer. He was staring at a map. Red pins dotted 5 states. Each pin was a death. Each pin was a failure. "How did she get to Charlotte?" he muttered. "Easy," DuPont replied. Charlotte came to her. Ben spun around. You still think she's working with Delilah? I think, DuPont said carefully. Charlotte knew more than she let on. Maybe she tried to play both sides. Maybe she wanted to help you, but got caught in the game. Ben looked down, remembering the lipstick on the mirror. She wasn't just a victim. Maybe not, DuPont said. But now she's a hostage, and Delilah wants us to come looking. Ben nodded. So let's give her what she wants. They launched Operation Ember the next day, named for the smoldering wreckage Delilah always left behind. DuPont coordinated the manhunt. 40 agents, 4 departments, drones, helicopters, digital surveillance, license plate readers, and over 3 dozen forensic specialists. Ben took charge of behavioral profiling. He wasn't just chasing her movements. He was chasing her mind. And it led him to one place. The Hollow Pines Inn. A roadside motel outside Savannah. Old, run down, but secure. High fences, few guests. A perfect hiding spot. Ben recognized it from a story Delilah told years ago, under a different name, in a different life. A honeymoon with her sweetest husband, she called it. That husband was dead now, buried under a different name, but the inn remained. Ben and DuPont drove there themselves. The place looked like a ghost town. Faded shutters, broken sign, only 3 cars in the lot. Ben flashed his badge at the front desk clerk, a girl no older than 18, eyes wide. We're looking for a woman, mid-30s, dark hair, green eyes, goes by Delilah Knox, or maybe Annie Fields, or Megan Kerr. The clerk paled. She checked in yesterday, she whispered. Room 12, Ben's heart thundered. Is she alone? The girl hesitated. Number she had a woman with her. Looked scared. Ben and DuPont exchanged a look. Charlotte. They didn't wait for backup. They moved fast, guns drawn, door kicked open. Room 12 was empty. The bed was made, the lights off, the window open. A fan spun lazily overhead. But on the bed was something chilling. Charlotte's scarf, tied into a perfect noose, and next to it, a photo. Ben, Charlotte, smiling at a fundraiser 2 years ago. Across the top, Delilah had scrawled, "Such a lovely couple. Shame it'll end in tears." She's tracking us, DuPont said. She knows our movements. Ben nodded grimly. She's watching the news, listening to radio dispatches. Maybe she has access to the GBI network. DuPont swore. We've got a leak. But Ben shook his head. Number she doesn't need a mole. She has Charlotte. She's using her for information. Stockholm Syndrome? Or leverage? Ben stared out the window. The woods beyond the motel seemed to breathe. She's playing a long game, he said. She's always 3 steps ahead because she plans 3 steps ahead. DuPont frowned. What's she planning now? Ben turned toward him. A trade. That night, an email came through. No subject line, just a message. Meet me alone. 1 hour, bring the camera crew, no cops, no tricks, or Charlotte dies. Location, Whitechapel Cemetery, plot 49B. Ben stared at the screen. She wants an audience. DuPont grabbed his shoulder. You can't go alone. I have to. DuPont looked furious. This isn't a movie, Ben. She's dangerous. She's already killed at least 8 people we know of. And she'll kill a 9th, Ben said quietly. If I don't show up. He stood. But I'm not going unarmed. Whitechapel Cemetery sat on the outskirts of Jasper County. Fog rolled over the headstones like ghosts in mourning. Ben arrived at 11:57 p.m. No backup, no communications, just a concealed Glock and a wire recording everything. He walked slowly toward plot 49B. There, under a weeping willow, stood Delilah, wearing black, pale, still as a statue. Beside her, Charlotte knelt, bound and gagged. Ben raised his hands. I came alone. Delilah smiled. Of course you did. You always follow the rules. Ben stepped forward. Let her go. Delilah tilted her head. You really care about her. I do. She smiled wider. Then you'll trade her for something. Ben paused. What do you want? Delilah pulled something from her coat, a small metal box. I want you to destroy this. Ben blinked. What is it? Everything, she whispered. My past, my names, my addresses, my files. You destroy this and she lives. Ben hesitated. Why now? Because, she said, eyes shining. I'm tired of the chase. I want a clean slate, and I want you to give it to me. Ben stepped closer. Why not just run? Delilah's smile faltered. For a second, just one, she looked tired. Because I don't want to run anymore. She placed the box on a gravestone. Destroy it. Here. Now, and Charlotte walks away. Ben stared at her. At Charlotte. At the box. He could shoot her. He could end it now. But she might pull the trigger first. He moved slowly toward the gravestone, lifted the box. Delilah reached into her pocket. Her hand closed around something. Ben's finger twitched on the trigger. But then, she pulled out a lighter, flipped it open. Burn it. Ben stared at the flame, and then, slowly, lowered the box into it. The paper inside caught fire. The box blackened, warped. Delilah watched it burn, her eyes never leaving the flame. When it was done, she turned to Charlotte, pulled out a knife. Ben tensed, but she only cut the ropes. Charlotte fell forward, gasping. Ben ran to her. Delilah stepped back, hands up. No tricks, she said. A deal's a deal. Ben grabbed Charlotte, helping her stand. It's over, Delilah, she laughed. Oh, Ben, it's never over. She turned and vanished into the mist. By the time Ben drew his gun, she was gone again. Charlotte sobbed in the car. She told me everything, she whispered. She knew about my brother, about my mother. She said if I helped her, she'd leave them alone. Ben didn't ask how much Charlotte gave up. He didn't want to know. He just said, "You're safe now." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true, because Delilah had given them something unexpected, a choice. She could have killed Charlotte. She could have killed him. But she didn't. She wanted something. And now that she'd burned her past, she was free to become something else. The next day, the GBI declared Delilah a federal fugitive. Posters, alerts, interagency coordination. Ben stood by a wall of faces. Her faces, different names, different hair, different lives. DuPont came beside him. You think she's done? Ben shook his head. No. Then what is she? Ben stared at the photos and whispered, she's evolution. The forests of Georgia had always held secrets, but none as horrific as the one unearthed 5 days after Delilah vanished from Whitechapel Cemetery. A group of teenage hikers stumbled upon it first, deep in a restricted zone of the Chattahoochee National Forest. At first, they thought the mound of soil and bone was the remains of an animal graveyard, until they spotted the boot sticking out of the ground. Within hours, the GBI cordoned off the site. Cadaver dogs went wild. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in. And by nightfall, the team had uncovered 16 shallow graves, all in various states of decomposition, all buried in deliberate, precise patterns, like some morbid patchwork quilt of murder. DuPont was first on the scene. Ben arrived shortly after. Jesus Christ, Ben muttered, stepping around the tarp-covered remains. DuPont pulled back one of the sheets. Beneath it was the half-skeletonized corpse of a woman, her jawbone fractured and eye sockets dark. Her skull bore the same telltale mark found on other victims, a cross-shaped incision carved into the frontal bone. Same pattern, DuPont said. Same carving, same surgical method. Delilah. Ben stood in the middle of the graves and slowly turned, scanning the arrangement. Each grave had a white rock placed at its head, each one marked with a number written in black Sharpie, 1 to 16. But it was the empty 17th pit at the far edge of the clearing that made Ben's blood run cold. "She was planning another," he said. DuPont nodded grimly. "Or it was meant for you." Back at headquarters, they ran dental records and DNA through every database available. Out of the 16 victims, 11 were identified within 48 hours. 5 remained John and Jane Does, but the ones they could name had something disturbing in common. All had prior convictions, but not for murder or anything that might have brought them to death row. No, these people had records for petty theft, misdemeanors, domestic disputes, and in some cases, wrongful arrests. Delilah had dug up the forgotten souls of the justice system, people she believed the law had failed, either as victims or perpetrators, and she'd delivered what she saw as final judgment. Ben sat at his desk, staring at the case files. "She's not just killing randomly," he said. "She's rewriting the justice system, one body at a time." DuPont joined him. "She's creating her own court." Ben picked up the photo of the latest grave and frowned. These graves weren't just random locations. They were carefully chosen. She's calling it something. "What?" He flipped the picture. Written in red ink on the back, as if mocking him, were the words, "Welcome to the Garden." The media caught wind within 24 hours. CNN ran a headline, "Killer's Secret Burial Ground. FBI hunts the woman behind the Garden of Bones." Social media exploded with theories. A vigilante cult, a female zodiac, a Black Dahlia turned butcher. But what none of them realized, and what Ben couldn't admit publicly, was that Delilah wanted the attention. Every leak, every headline, every Reddit thread only fed her. She wasn't just killing, she was performing, and now she had a full audience. 3 days later, a letter arrived at the Atlanta GBI office. No postage, no return address, just a white envelope marked Benedict Quinn.